Fewer young people than ever are going to be able to buy a house in their lifetime, and at the same time, homes are getting more expensive every year.
What?
But if nobody can afford to buy a house, then how the fuck do they keep getting more expensive?
So the idea of being able to save a 20% down payment is almost unimaginable.
Yeah, rent gets raised, 1,000% with no notice. And
a family home should be the bedrock of your financial life. It gives you somewhere to live while building up equity in a place that you can one day call your own. Owning a home with a 30-year mortgage is cheaper out of pocket every month in most cities than renting. So if you can buy your own home, you will be richer now and richer in the future. You already know this, but if you're in the 75% of my audience that doesn't own a home, it's probably because you can't afford one. According to a report by Redfin, only 21% of homes that went on sale in 2022 were considered affordable. That's down from 60% of homes that went on sale in 2021. That means in just 1 year, 2/3 of all affordable housing became too expensive for the average American. The team conducting this survey concluded that housing affordability is at its lowest point in history. But what's the endgame here? If people can't afford a home, then house prices can't go up anymore, right? Wrong. I don't want to make another one of those stupid finfluencer videos about how the housing market is going to crash in 3.5 days, but there are 3 reasons why it could get a lot worse before it gets better. The first reason is that houses do not need to be affordable for you to buy one. If you think that can't make sense, there is an entire industry working to make it true. You don't save money to buy a house. You save money for a down payment.
The housing costs are completely out of line with wages.
Wages have not kept up with house prices, but a 20% down payment only grows at 1/5 the rate in absolute terms, so people are still able to get into the market. According to Zillow, the average home sold in America in 2020 traded for $230,000. At the start of 2023, the average home price was $330,000, a jump of $100,000 in less than 3 years. According to Forbes, the average American makes a salary of $59,000 before tax. After federal tax and FICA, that leaves them with a take-home of $49,000. If this average person saved a ridiculous 70% of their take-home pay to buy a house, they would be just as far away from their goal after 3 years because the price of the average house grew just as fast as their savings. The average home earns as much as the average person. But most people only save for a down payment, so 70% becomes 14% or 7% if it's a dual-income household where the other partner also earns the average salary. That's still a major savings commitment when 57% of Americans can't afford a $1,000 payment without taking on debt. 14% of your take-home pay should be more manageable than 70%. But remember, this is only how much you would need to save just to keep up with price increases. This doesn't actually get you any closer to your goal of buying a home. Lenders and banks with a vested interest in real estate assets across the country know that it is still hard for most families who also need to pay for food, rent, and other essentials that are outpacing wages. So they have moved the goalposts. A report by the National Association of Realtors found that the average down payment for a first-time homebuyer was just 7%, and the average down payment for a repeat purchaser that has had time to build equity in their previous home was only 17%. If you only need to put a tiny deposit down, house prices can increase to many multiples of your income before it becomes impossible to buy a house. If you only need to save for a 7% down payment, then just a 10% savings rate over 3 years from an average wage would get you into an average house. You would be more disciplined than the average American, but it's not impossible with some sacrifice. If that's still too hard for you, then Zillow recently announced that they would be trialing a 1% down payment loan product to help people that couldn't save any money make the biggest financial commitment of their lives.
Here's how it works. The buyer pays a down payment of 1%, and then Zillow makes an additional contribution of 2% at closing. That is a grant and doesn't need to be paid back.
So even though houses are making more money than you are, the price of entry is being reduced just as fast. But that's only to make the down payment. You still need to make the repayments, and if you can't put 20% down, what hope do you have of making repayments on a house? Well, it's time to learn how money works to find out if this circus really can go on forever. The second way that houses can keep on getting more expensive even when nobody can afford to buy them is because nobody is selling them.
But we also don't have anyone putting their home on the market just because they have a 30-year fixed rate below 3%. So nobody wants to sell a home right now, and there are still plenty of people who want to move.
Home sales in America are at their lowest level in a decade despite population growth. According to data from the National Association of Realtors, 6 million homes were sold in 2021. but now only 4 million homes are selling at an annualized rate. Potential sellers with a home loan don't want to sell, because the rental market is even more unaffordable, and if they move into a new home, they will get a new home loan that has a much higher rate than what they are paying currently. Many people already moved during COVID, and another move so quickly would be too disruptive on their social and family lives, in addition to the significant interest expense of new home loans. The average homeowner spends 13.2 years in their home. After a flurry of home buying activity in the last 3 years, more Americans than ever are just settling into their new home, and they have longer than ever before they consider selling. New buyers are also choosing to wait out their purchases until interest rates drop. The average number of people living in a household also increased recently for the first time in 160 years, after a long trend of smaller families and people choosing to move out into their own homes. According to Pew Research that published this report, this was because more younger adults were choosing to, or being forced, to live with their parents for longer to avoid living in an unaffordable housing market. The market is still active, but regular buyers and regular sellers are choosing to sit out until moving into a new home becomes more affordable. And it's the people who are left that are the third reason this can keep going on longer than you think. There are 3 groups still in the game. The first group are all cash buyers that have money from selling their old home and want to buy a new one. If you are a boomer that purchased their home in the 1970s for 3 nickels and you now want to downsize, now is an ideal time to take advantage of the market. When prices are higher, the spread between a single-family freestanding home and a smaller property is larger, giving you more cash to live off of. The second group are people moving interstate. Unaffordable housing is pushing people out of expensive cities across the country. You would probably prefer to stay in your home city even if you had a job that you could do from anywhere. Closeness to friends, family, and familiar amenities is why people only live 18 miles from their hometown on average. In defiance of the part-time hedge fund manager and full-time YouTube comedian Patrick Boyle,
where should my friend How Money Works live? I don't know, maybe Dubai. He's one of those flashy YouTuber types. He probably wants to live on one of those Palm Islands, hang out at malls buying designer goods, and maybe do some indoor skiing. That's just the kind of guy he is.
I chose to stay in my crappy 1-bedroom San Francisco apartment because moving is a pain in the ass. But if you are really struggling to afford a high cost of living city, you can improve your lifestyle by moving to cheaper cities with lower rents and property prices. If you move from a city like San Francisco, Seattle, or New York to any other city in the country, you are going to be able to buy a lot more house for the same money. Your higher income from working in these areas will push up local prices, and in the process of avoiding the rising home prices, you have just made it worse.
And therefore you have more people competing for rental space because the cooling of housing market has kept people longer in rental tenure. So that is the reason why competition has increased. The supply has been constrained because people are not moving from rental to owner.
The third group are investors. Investors only care about the return on their assets. Prices are high right now, and investors using financing to buy property are also paying higher interest rates, but in return, they are charging higher rents to long-term tenants and short-term vacationers if they list their properties on sites like Airbnb.
Make no mistake, prices are still too high.
The largest increase in home buying has come from this group. According to Redfin, year-on-year growth in investment purchases reached 145% in 2022, and institutional investors buying up stock for real estate investment trusts were the fastest growing group of investors. Real estate investment trusts, or REITs, work like index funds for real estate. They buy a portfolio of properties using money collected from a large group of investors. REITs are sold both over-the-counter through companies like Blackstone for high-net-worth investors or as exchange-listed securities for average people. REITs used to focus on commercial real estate like shopping malls, hotels, warehouses, office buildings, and farmland. The high cost of these properties made them suitable for sharing between multiple investors. Residential REITs have experienced a sharp rise in popularity, though, because people that can't afford to buy a home themselves still want exposure to this market. Some people are putting savings towards a down payment into REITs because they should provide returns consistent with the residential real estate market so their savings won't be left behind by rising house prices. The popularity of this asset class has been caused by unaffordable housing, and it's also made housing more unaffordable. But this can't last forever.
This is the worst!
And as much as I hate to say it, those stupid fucking Finfluencer thumbnails may be right. Things are starting to change.
This is why the market is largely resisted to sell-off and why it's still possible for home prices to go even higher, even though it kind of makes no sense.
An updated Redfin report has revealed that investor purchases have slowed significantly, and surveys from local agents in cities like Las Vegas, Austin, Miami, and Houston revealed that institutional purchases have stopped completely. The private equity company Blackstone, not to be confused with the investment index company BlackRock, had to block investor withdrawals from its $71 billion earlier this year, sparking concerns that the whole system was overvalued. If investors pull their money from these trusts too quickly, the investment managers, in this case Blackstone, will be forced to sell one of their properties in their portfolio. BlackRock was accused of overestimating the price of the properties it had in its portfolio, but that's hard to prove until it's forced to sell one of them. But as soon as just one property needs to be sold, all other comparable properties in that trust need to be readjusted to a similar value. A sharp drop in the value of the trust could trigger more investors to withdraw their funds, causing the manager to sell more properties, pushing down prices even further. But don't get your hopes up too much. If you own shares in a REIT, the easiest way for you to liquidate your position would be to sell your shares to another investor, which doesn't require any cash to be liquidated from the assets themselves. The bonus fourth reason is that wealthy families are just doing a better job of holding onto more properties for themselves. In the past, family wealth struggled to get past the first two generations, but now that investing has become so easy and lucrative, we might be starting to live in a new age of nobility where family dynasties can last centuries. It doesn't mean anything to be working class or middle class anymore. The only thing that matters is if you own a home or if you don't. The home you live in now statistically makes more money than you do, and the last hope that a lot of young people have to catch up is getting a house gifted to them by a relative. Which begs the question, what happens to the real estate market when all the boomers die?
Anyone looking to buy a home right now is facing a double challenge amid the Federal Reserve's efforts to slow inflation.
But even in places where houses are usually expensive, they seem even more expensive.
Housing is becoming a luxury that the majority of first-time homebuyers cannot afford.
There's an old saying that the best time to start investing was 30 years ago. The second best time is right now. But that conventional wisdom might not hold up in today's market. Buying a home at the right time could set you and your family up for financial security for the rest of your life. The only thing is, the right time was when you were still in school, and if you try and buy a home now, you will be taking on record high interest rates, record high prices, and record low availability all at the same time. People sell homes for two reasons: because they want to and because they have to. Nobody who already has a home wants to sell it because most Americans have been able to lock in record low interest rates. If they sell their house and buy another one, they will get a new mortgage at interest rates which will triple their payments on a home of the same value. According to data from the National Association of Realtors, 87% of new home purchases are made using a mortgage, and the average down payment of a first home buyer is only 7%. That means higher mortgage rates are worth avoiding at all costs. A report by the Wall Street Journal found that even when homeowners moved interstate, they would hold on to their homes and rent them out, and then rent another house to live in. Everybody that wants to sell their home is waiting for interest rates to fall. Everybody who wants to buy a home is also waiting for interest rates to fall. And everybody who is stuck renting is being forced to compete with people who already own a home but don't want to sell it because they have locked in a sweet interest rate. The players in the real estate market are stuck in a Mexican standoff, but the renters are stuck fighting with a banana. The only hope for people who just want to buy a home is to get it off someone who needs to sell. According to another report published by the National Association of Realtors, the average home seller in America was 60 years old. At that age, one of the reasons people need to sell their home is because they are dead. But if you are holding out hope that the biggest home-owning generation in America downsizing will make it easier for people trying to buy their first home, I am here to do what I do best and crush your dreams with facts and figures. There are 3 reasons why older generations permanently exiting the above-ground real estate market isn't going to make it easier to buy a house. The first reason is that they can take it with them when they are gone. The inequality between homeowners and renters is even worse in old age. According to data from LendingTree, 8 out of 10 Americans aged over 65 own their own home, and only 19% of those still have a mortgage. The fastest growing reason why they are selling their homes is not because they are dying. It's because they need money to pay for retirement living. A report by the Washington Post found that the annual cost of nursing homes has gone from a median of $65,000 a year in 2004 to $108,000 a year in 2020 when the article was published. Conditions in nursing homes have also been getting worse, as it's one of the fastest growing asset classes for private equity companies like Blackstone and Bain looking to get higher returns on real estate. In 2017, Blackstone closed a $745 million deal with the real estate investment trust Welltower to buy its portfolio of 3,400 aged care units. Blackstone's holdings are growing, but they are dwarfed by other private equity firms that have raised billions directly into aged living because they know how much value it offers investors. By cutting costs and raising prices, these companies have generated exceptional yields off real estate developments that cater to a growing market of elderly Americans. Most Americans don't make $108,000 a year, and even fewer can afford that much in retirement, so people are selling their homes to pay their fees to these facilities. Private equity's role in buying up single-family homes away from regular families is overstated, but they have realized that they don't even need to own the homes to benefit from their value. States where home prices were highest had the most expensive aged care facilities, because elderly residents in those states have more money to pay for it after selling their homes. People that can't afford to pay these fees are relying on limited Social Security and their own family and friends to support them when they can no longer physically work. According to federal data and a 2020 Brookings study, slightly more than 10% of American adults provide some type of care to another adult. Usually, it is an adult children caring for their parents. In an interview with the Washington Post, Jan Muchler, a director of the Gerontology Institute at the University of Massachusetts, said that when an adult child takes on those roles, a lot of times they have to give something else up. And sometimes that's some of their work or all of their job. So if you are waiting for that inheritance to finally buy your first home, it's just as likely that this wealth will be sucked up by private equity companies before it gets to you. And that's just the first reason. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why you probably won't benefit as much as you are hoping from the boomers passing down their homes. The average age of a first home buyer in America is now 35 years old, up from 33 years old in 2021 and just 30 years old in 2010. A survey of young homebuyers conducted by Freddie Mac and Bankrate asked why young people were waiting until later in life to buy a home. I probably don't need to tell you that the number one response was that people wanted to buy their first home sooner, but they couldn't afford it until they had paid off their student loans, progressed in their career, and had dedicated years of saving a down payment. New financial products that offer home lending with lower down payment requirements have been rolled out by banks, non-bank lenders, and the government as an answer to this problem. The average down payment of 7% means that some first-time homebuyers are contributing significantly less to their first purchase by using products like the Federal Housing Administration loan insurance, which allows first-time buyers to put down as little as 3% of the purchase price plus closing costs. Companies like Zillow are taking this a step further, with plans to roll out 1% down payment financing to eligible homebuyers nationwide. If you are someone who wants to buy their first home, these offers may look like they are there to help you out, but they are actually just making the problem even worse. The only people these lending products are really helping out are the people who already own multiple properties, which according to Redfin are mostly baby boomers who own $18 trillion worth of real estate. According to the disclosures of these loan products, most offers have a limit on the total loan size that can be taken out. These products are meant for first-time homebuyers who want to buy a basic home, so that's fair enough. But all that it really does is pump up the price of affordable homes until they become unaffordable again, in an even worse way. What these loan products do is move the financial bottleneck from the down payment to the repayments. Just because someone can get into a $750,000 house with only $10,000 down doesn't mean they'll be able to afford the repayments. A down payment is a one-time expense, but repayments on a house that is more expensive than it should be because of a loan product like this have to be paid every month for the next 30 years. The only real winners are the people that purchased these homes when they were a quarter of their current value and can now sell them to buyers with risky financing. And that's the second reason why boomers retiring from life isn't going to make it easier for you to find a home. It was never a matter of age. According to the US Census Bureau estimates from 2016, the number of families with children who own their own home decreased by 3.6 million in the 10 years prior to the survey. Families with children were preferring to rent, either because of the flexibility offered or because they could not afford to buy their own home. Families that own their own home also have fewer children on average, and the overall national home ownership rate has decreased by 3.4%. However, the small number of families that own multiple pieces of real estate as rental properties or holiday homes is growing. According to the 2022 Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, only 6% of Americans own property that they inherited, and only 3% live in a property that was passed down to them. The other homes are being kept by a small handful of children from wealthy families as investment properties, often in addition to the homes that they already own themselves. So if you think you just need to wait out the boomers to finally afford a home, unfortunately, the statistics say that their estates are only going to become more concentrated in the hands of fewer people. Their age doesn't matter, but their wealth does. An article by Bloomberg surveyed people with adult children and found that a majority of respondents reported draining their own retirement savings to support their children who are struggling to afford a home to live in. Some families are going to leave multiple homes to a few children. Some families are going to make big sacrifices to help their children. Some families don't have enough to help at all, and some families are going to need support from their children. If you are not a part of the first two groups, then you are going to be even further behind when assets are passed down from older generations. And that's the third reason why you shouldn't hold out hope for a flood of new houses hitting the market when all the boomers die. They aren't leaving houses for you. A 2017 census report found that a third of counties in America were experiencing more deaths than births. States like Florida have a lot of old wealthy retirees that have displaced normal families in certain communities. The homes that are being left in these areas don't have the amenities that first home buyers want, like access to job opportunities or good school districts, because retirees pick places to live to avoid these things. If the people who inherit these properties don't want to live in a community full of retirees, they can either sell the property or rent it out. If they sell the property, it will add supply to the housing market, but it won't be in an area where a first homebuyer wants to purchase. According to the State of Housing published by Harvard University, institutional investors have seen this gap and are targeting affordable homes, especially in the Sun Belt, because they offer a good risk-adjusted return on investment. The role of institutional investors like private equity firms in the real estate market is almost always sensationalized, but they account for 13% of all residential sales in 2021, according to a report published by the National Association of Realtors. It doesn't call for the stupid fucking laser eyes just yet, but in the Sunbelt counties that they are targeting, they are an even larger share of buyers, and they have moved the market. So baby boomers are going to leave their homes behind, but they will mostly be leaving them to their already wealthy children or institutional investors. Probably not the story you wanted to hear, but I couldn't give up on an opportunity to shit on your dreams to get 2024 started on the right note. Rising home prices suck for almost everybody. Even people that own their own homes are not really better off financially if they sell their overpriced home, because they will just have to buy another overpriced home unless they want to live on the street. If there is one group of people that actually are enjoying homes becoming unaffordable, it's real estate agents. Realtors across the country have used their surprising market power to make this problem much worse, and charge a nice fat commission while doing it. But they may have pushed their luck too far, and a new landmark antitrust lawsuit could radically change how we buy and sell our homes for better or for worse.
A new settlement could dramatically change the way you buy a home.
The price of buying a home in the U.S. is going up. According to new data out this morning, prices rose 6.5% over last year.
Realtors are more than just the people that open the door and tell you about the schools at an open house. They are a shockingly organized group that has a lot of influence over how the real estate market functions. Real estate agents and realtors are technically two different things. All realtors are real estate agents, but not all real estate agents are realtors. They both buy and sell houses on behalf of clients for whom they act as agents. But for a real estate agent to call themselves a realtor, they must be a part of the National Association of Realtors, an industry group that represents most agents in America. As part of their membership, realtors get access to the Multiple Listing Service, or MLS, which is a database of all residential real estate listings in the area. If you want to sell houses as an agent, you can't compete without access to this database. And if you want to get access to this invaluable market information, you must register as a realtor. That membership is a pretty good investment anyway. The NAR behaves almost like a union for its independent members, ensuring that home sellers can't get agents to compete with one another for lower commissions. The industry standard is 6%, which gets split between the listing agent selling the home and a buyer's agent if the purchaser uses one. The commission gets paid from the proceeds of the home sale before the remainder of that money gets transferred from the seller's bank account. This commission covers the expenses of selling real estate, like running open houses, posting on sites like Zillow, taking photos of the property, insurance, and signposting the home. Whatever is left goes to the agency, which has its own expense. And then whatever is left after that goes to the realtors themselves, split between the buy and sell side. According to data from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the average home sale price in America has risen from $272,000 in 2010 to $492,000 in Q4 of last year. Since the realtor's commission is based on the sale price, it means that the average commission paid to realtors has doubled in just 13 years, outpacing inflation by 120%. It gets even better for real estate agents though, because their expenses have not increased as fast as home prices, which means they are keeping more than that 6% for themselves. 10 years ago, the average agent would have made about $5,000 after all expenses for selling the average home. Today, they are making $15,000 from the average home. According to data compiled by Statista from the National Association of Realtors themselves, this has created a gold rush as almost 600,000 new agents have signed up as realtors in the last 10 years alone, making selling real estate one of the fastest growing jobs in the country. With so many new market entrants and such creamy margins, commissions should be competitive. An agent can make just as much money by selling a house with a 4% commission today as they could with a 6% commission 10 years ago. But the National Association of Realtors won't let their agents undercut each other. Unsurprisingly, this has come at the expense of the people that just want to buy or sell their home. Realtors have broken the already broken real estate market in 3 ways, but poor market conditions, not to mention a landmark lawsuit, could actually make things worse for everybody, including the realtors. The antitrust lawsuit will see the National Association of Realtors pay a fine of $418 million. To a group as large as the NAR, that could just be factored into the cost of doing business. But the lawsuit will also mandate changes in how agents sell real estate and how they get paid for doing it. And that's the first way that real estate agents ruined real estate for themselves. They made it not worth selling. According to data from the National Association of Realtors, the number of first home buyers in America as a share of all home buyers has been declining since 2010. Now, the number of first home buyers has halved, and the most common type of buyer by far is someone who just sold their home and is looking to upgrade or downsize. The 6% realtor's commission on the average home is now worth half of the average American's annual salary before tax. If you are selling your home, this expense isn't as easy to notice as paying your electric bill, because it comes out of the proceeds of selling the home. According to the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, homes have never been a higher multiple of average household incomes, so 6% of the sale being taken out of your biggest assets could take you years to recover from without you even noticing. According to the National Association of Realtors, the average down payment of a first home buyer is just 6%, the same amount as the industry standard sales commission. The average down payment for someone who has already sold their home and is buying a new home is just 17%, which means almost half of the equity that potential new home purchases have in their purchase would be taken as a realtor's commission if they sold it. So, people just aren't selling their homes. A combination of these high transaction costs and interest rates locked in at low rates means that nobody is selling their homes. If no homes are trading hands, it doesn't matter how high a realtor's commission is, because 6% of $0 is still $0. The 1.6 million realtors in America right now are all fighting over a tiny handful of listings. A survey conducted by Alignable, a small business network and publication, found that 45% of realtors reported that they were struggling to pay rent due to slow sales. Other agents are giving up on the suggestion of the NAR and are undercutting their competition and commission just to get any sales they can. And it's sneaky tactics like this that are the second way realtors have ruined real estate for themselves. There is reason I have used data from the National Association of Realtors 5 separate times in a video talking about the objectionable practices of the National Association of Realtors. The reason is because their multiple listing service is the most comprehensive database of real estate transactions in the country. The platform includes information on the price of the homes that realtors have for sale, the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and how much the property has previously sold for. This is different from real estate sites like Zillow because it also includes information about commissions that can be shared between the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. In America, 89% of all residential real estate sales are made to buyers employing the help of a buyer's agent, again according to data from the National Association of Realtors. In other countries, this is far less common, because buyers have to pay for buyer's agents out of their own pockets. But in America, it is paid by the seller of the property by splitting the 6%. According to the antitrust lawsuit, the realtor's MLS system lets agents advertise to buyer's agents how much of a split they would offer to close a sale. A listing agent wasn't required to offer any cut of their commission at all. But if they did that, no buyer's agents would advise their clients to purchase that property since there was no incentive for them. This created a problem known as steering. Let's say you are a real estate agent trying to sell a property that isn't great. You ask for a price above fair market value, but you offer a nice big cut of your total commissions to any buyer's agent that can convince their clients to buy your shitty listing. Your listing is going to get more interest from buyers than a better property which is not offering a commission split because buyer's agents are going to steer their clients towards the properties that are going to pay them more. The lawsuit alleges that not only has this cost regular buyers that were counting on the unbiased advice of their buyer's agents, it has also contributed to real estate price growth because it makes legitimate price discovery hard when both sides on the negotiating table want a sale to get made at any price. A stipulation of the antitrust settlement is that the National Association of Realtors must remove any compensation information to buyer's agents from the multiple listing service. Now, if that sounds to you like it's going to fix this broken system, then let me ruin that for you. Most realtors and buyer's agents in a local area have a very close professional relationship. Cultivating these relationships is part of their job. Just because they aren't allowed to list their commissions on the MLS anymore doesn't mean that they can't just pick up the phone and ask around for who will give them the most money. This could actually make things worse, because at least the open information on the MLS created some kind of competition between agents. Now, deals between agents can be discussed in private, and better deals can be made between agents that have an ongoing quid pro quo relationship. And that's the third reason why real estate agents have ruined real estate for themselves. Online platforms like Zillow and Redfin now offer a lot of the information that people used to rely on an agent for. Homebuyers have shown a preference for doing more research themselves using information that is available on these sites rather than asking potentially biased agents who want to push them into making a quick sale. Other agents outside of the National Association of Realtors are now offering fixed price sales as low as $1,500 for running a basic home sale. The pressure is now on traditional agents to convince a limited pool of home sellers that they can achieve a better sales price after their 6% cut than a seller using one of these low-cost brokerages. Sellers are unlikely to pass much of these savings along to buyers while inventory is low. But if people are going to give less of a cut to an agent, then they might be more willing to put their home on the market. According to the market data firm Adam, the length of time that the average seller has owned their home for is now at an almost all-time high. Thanks to the cost of selling, low interest rates, and strong rental markets, people are holding onto their homes for longer than ever. If this lawsuit does reduce the control that agents have over the home selling process, then this could incentivize homeowners with multiple properties to move the homes they have been holding onto. This could make the market a little better for regular home buyers, but it will make it a lot better for institutional investors. According to a survey conducted by John Burns Real Estate Consulting, institutional investors purchased 25% of the homes flipped in the third quarter of 2023. Combined with independent investors, they were responsible for a total of 44% of all home sales. The transaction costs of trading real estate are one of the biggest weaknesses of a home as an asset class or as a project that can be purchased, lightly renovated, and then flipped for a profit. Investors doing this take stock of affordable homes off the market and then charge a premium for a renovated property, increasing prices. If these transaction costs are reduced to a similar level to traditional equities, it will likely push even more institutional investors and home flippers into the market, easily outdoing any of the price benefits of reduced commissions. Affordable housing has become the defining challenge of this generation, not only in America, but across the world.
Home prices.
House prices.
House prices
have grown so much faster than wages that young people will struggle for years just to save for a down payment. Also, they can struggle for decades to make the repayments on their mortgage. At the same time, we are told that our home is our biggest asset. And the last time the real estate market saw a significant dip, it took the global economy down with it. So, can we make houses affordable without destroying the economy?
I know the cost of housing is so important to you.
We want home ownership to be a reality.
We introduced a new incentive program to help first-time homebuyers get into the market.
According to data from the US Census Bureau, the home ownership rate in America is 65%. So the majority of people have a direct financial interest in not seeing their biggest financial asset lose its value. This is in spite of the fact that according to a study by the Cato Institute, 87% of Americans are worried about the cost of housing, which means there is a big overlap between people who want affordable housing, as long as it's not theirs. This means that the only winning course of action for politicians is to performatively make the problem worse. The Biden administration has announced plans to offer tax credits of up to $10,000 to families selling their home to another owner-occupant, in addition to another tax credit of up to $5,000 to offset mortgage rates for first-time homebuyers. These could be used in conjunction with a $25,000 bonus for first-generation homebuyers. But if you are a new buyer and get $40,000 worth of extra tax bonuses and grants, all that will do is make affordable housing $40,000 more expensive, which doesn't really make you any better off overall. It is great for existing property owners though. This has been tried in other countries like Australia and Canada, and it did not work as a long-term solution. Although it did allow for Richard to Airbnb his basement and use the proceeds to buy a McLaren. In fact, their real estate market is even more fucked than ours. Presumably, the only reason Patrick Boyle has filmed all of his videos in random offices and classrooms is because he couldn't afford the rent on his flat in London on his modest income as a hedge fund manager. Most policies that aim to give more purchasing power to new buyers really only benefit existing owners, even if it does let politicians score some easy points in the short term. So, if you can't make houses more affordable by increasing people's buying power, then the only option left is to make houses more affordable by lowering their prices. This sounds simple, but it can cause some big problems. If house prices collapse too quickly, it can leave people underwater on their home loans, where the money they owe to the bank is worth more than the house itself. This can destabilize the financial system and the economy that depends on it, because it makes lending highly risky if debt can't be secured against real assets and some people choose to just walk away from their homes. This can have knock-on effects that will impact every aspect of your financial life. The people who will be hurt most by a housing crash are people who have only just purchased their first home and still have a large mortgage on it, since they have the smallest equity buffer before their mortgage is worth more than their house. People who have owned their home for a long time and have a small or no mortgage won't be hurt and might even just enjoy the lower property taxes. Sacrificing the people on the bottom rung of the housing ladder to let more people grab on isn't a good idea, and it weirdly doesn't even make houses affordable. This was the situation for many American households in 2008. Even though house prices in some areas more than halved, the actual rate of home ownership over that time also fell significantly. So just making houses cheaper isn't enough to make houses more affordable, unless you look at some radical and not so radical solutions that won't be politically popular, but just might work. There are solutions that could actually make houses cheaper and keep them cheaper, and the political will to take these drastic steps is growing every day. You see, this chart here doesn't tell the full story. The spike here wasn't a bunch of new people buying a home and then selling it again. It was mostly young people moving back in with their parents at the start of the pandemic. This chart only measures the percentage of Americans that live in an owner-occupied home. It doesn't account for if they actually own it. According to data collected from the US Census Bureau and compiled by USA Facts, the number of people aged between 25 and 34 still living at home with their parents peaked to an all-time high in 2020, and has remained near historic highs. Most young adults in this age group would prefer a place of their own. But house prices and rent have made it financially challenging for most and outright impossible for many. So we might soon have enough people to start demanding more drastic steps. One solution that has gained a lot of attention in recent years is a land value tax that, as the name suggests, would charge property owners on the value of their land, but not on the value of the property as a whole. A land value tax doesn't consider the value of buildings and improvements on top of the land. It just accounts for the value of the land itself and charges whoever owns that land a percentage of its value every year, just like you pay a percentage of your income every year. There are details to be hammered out over exactly how much that percentage should be and if it should be progressive like income taxes. For example, someone that owns their family home on a lot worth $500,000 might have to pay 1% or $5,000 every year in a land value tax. But a wealthy landlord that owns 50 single-family homes that are collectively worth $25 million might have to pay a 4% rate or $1 million every year. With the right fine-tuning, this system, which was first popularized by economist Henry George, promises to fix a lot of society's problems, including housing. In his most famous book, Progress and Poverty, George argued that a land value tax could be a country's only tax if it was managed well enough. The name of the book sounds about as depressing as your average How Money Works video. But it became so popular in the late 19th century that an entire political movement grew up around it, today known simply as Georgism. Supporters of Georgism make some big promises, but for now you only need to focus on one aspect, which is that it should make housing more affordable. Adding a tax to something to make it more affordable might be a little bit counterintuitive. But if landowners have to pay a portion of their land's value every year in tax, they have a strong incentive to maximize returns on that land or otherwise sell it to someone who could. The land value tax on a completely empty lot should theoretically be the same as the land value tax on a lot next door that has a 50-unit apartment building on it collecting 50 sets of rent. The owner of the vacant lot is motivated to either sell their land or build something on it to generate income to offset the tax that they are paying to own the land because they pay the same tax no matter what. This could act as a way to discourage vast landholding purely for capital appreciation, because it makes it a lot less profitable to sit and hold on to empty real estate. A broad land value tax could also offset income taxes, which means regular working people will have more disposable income to put towards buying houses. Traditional Georgism actually argued that a land value tax could replace income taxes entirely, but even if you don't believe that is possible, it would still help. If the average house is worth $1 million, that is not actually a problem if the average worker is making $250,000. But in reality, house prices have massively outpaced increases in wages since the 1970s. A land value tax could rebalance this in 3 ways. The first way is by reducing income taxes, since the government would get an alternative source of revenue. It's up to you to decide if they would really pass that along though. The second way is by making real estate a less attractive buy and hold investment, pushing more supply onto the market by getting people to actually do something with their land instead of treating it like a buy and hold investment. The third way it could close this widening gap is to encourage people to invest into actual businesses that make stuff and employ people rather than buying and holding land. More business investment instead of more real estate speculation should increase worker productivity and by extension wages, closing the gap between income and house prices. Perhaps the best part of all of this is that it can be done slowly, so that house prices don't collapse overnight, which would just make things worse for regular people. The challenge with this is political. People don't like taxes, and without sitting everyone down and forcing them to read the work of Henry George, you are going to struggle to sell this to voters when big landowners can easily lobby against it by talking about poor hardworking farmers and retirees that are going to be forced out of their home by another tax. The moral justification of a land value tax is that a country belongs to its people, and if you specifically want the exclusive use of a bit of that country as your own private property, you owe a little bit of rent to everybody else in the country for using land that belongs to them. It makes sense, but it's not going to be politically popular. It is also more government interference in the free market, thumbing the scale in favor of one type of investor over another. But that's actually the point. Even if widespread land value tax is never going to happen, at the very least, taxes that currently favor real estate over business investment should entirely be scrapped. Real estate-specific government perks like 1031 exchanges, reduced capital gains, opportunity zones, negative gearing, pass-throughs, deferments, deductions, tax credits, home buyers plans, government-backed mortgages, and home office write-offs are all kind of like a negative land tax which shifts government incentives in favor of hoarding as much land as possible. With this many perks, you shouldn't really be surprised that people buy real estate as an investment. The other weakness of a land value tax is that it assumes that people with land holdings wouldn't already be building housing on them to maximize their rental income if they could. But they can't. So, the second solution to making houses more affordable without destroying the economy is simply to build more houses. Zoning, NIMBYism, HOAs, a long list of confusing codes, and a lack of skilled tradesmen has made building a home a major ordeal. The sign of a successful economy is that it can produce things like a computer, a car, or a house efficiently and for a competitive price. We have convinced ourselves that houses are somehow special, and that them being limited and expensive is a positive characteristic. According to census data, America is building fewer houses today than we were in the 1970s, even though our population has almost doubled. Building houses does more than just increase the supply of an essential commodity. It also gives lots of jobs to lots of people because building homes and the utilities that support them require real hands-on work. Now, just building more houses won't solve all of our problems. American cities have a major problem with urban sprawl. Building a house an hour away from a city center with no public transport or local amenities just replaces one problem with another. But we can fix this by building medium-density housing for people who just want a decent place to live. People are pro new medium-density home construction nationally, but are anti-construction locally. According to a survey conducted by the US Census Bureau, home equity is simply considered as most households' most significant asset. So most people don't want housing supplies diluted, especially in their local area with cheaper alternatives. I don't think I really need to convince you that building more houses to fix a housing shortage is an important step, but it probably won't be enough by itself. China has built more houses than any other country on the planet in the last 20 years, and they have homes that are even more unaffordable than ours. Yes, they have a lot of people, But their building spree more than made up for this. China built so many new homes that thousands of new developments and millions of apartments are sitting empty in so-called ghost cities that exist just for people to own a home. In China, a home is not just people's biggest investment. It's their only investment. According to an analysis by JP Morgan's private banking division, Chinese real estate was the single largest asset class in the world as of 2021. And that's exactly the problem. It was a financial asset first and a place for people to live second. A lot of the housing constructed in China in the last 20 years you couldn't even live in. It was an empty concrete box with no utilities in a tower with no people. It was a financial asset in the world's biggest filing cabinet. But learning from those mistakes can show us the third way to make housing affordable without destroying the economy. China is experiencing a significant slowdown because of how much emphasis they put on real estate as a financial asset. But here in America, we are making the same mistakes. Companies are turning family homes into financial assets that can be bundled up and traded on securities markets like stocks, bonds, or options. According to data from Redfin, investors purchased more than a quarter of affordable homes sold in America last quarter, which was an all-time high. Investors include anybody from someone purchasing their first investment property all the way up to Invitation Homes buying their 100,000th home. The number of single-family homes owned by large corporate investors is still less than 2% of total housing stock and a small share of home purchases. But before COVID, it was less than 1%. Whatever the investor looks like, real estate has become too attractive as a financial asset because rents are high and the government has demonstrated that they won't let prices fall, precisely because the real estate market has become too big to fail. Definancializing real estate could be as simple as an outright ban on corporate ownership of family homes. If my community polls are an indicator of national sentiment, it's one of the first solutions that would be politically popular. Just reining in lending could also put the brakes on property investors who see real estate as a way to leverage their way into an overnight fortune by extracting rent rather than investing in something productive. To be fair, the financial system is just as guilty. If you want to take out a 5-to-1 leverage position to start a business that will employ people, a bank would laugh you out of a branch. But ask for a 50-to-1 leverage position on a home and you will have financial firms fighting for your business. How much money would you need to buy the American dream? Not how much would you need to make in order to afford the repayments on the American dream. How much would you need to buy the house, the 2 cars, the family, and a basic vacation every year? I know it's not going to blow your mind to find out that these supposedly vital ingredients to a good life have gotten kind of expensive, but it has reached a tipping point. The American dream is not dead, so much as it's an extreme luxury in many parts of the country that can now cost as much as $10 million to afford. That's more than most of us will ever earn in our lifetimes before taxes, interest payments, and basic essentials like food. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but holding on to the traditional financial wisdom of what you ought to have in life is now permanently out of reach for most people. And as more Americans realize this, it's fundamentally reshaping our economy.
Whether or not to have children, it's a topic these young minds discuss and contemplate.
Aaron, his wife Celia, and their 2 children have lived in this parking lot outside of Seattle for the past 9 months.
Workers carry $6,000 of credit card debt, while the average American has almost $8,000 worth.
This household configuration of dual income partners living alone without children is on the rise.
So, there are 3 points to this video that are each obvious by themselves, but get really interesting or worrying when you think about them all together. The first point is that the typical American dream has gone from an affordable lifestyle that even someone with a basic job could afford to live to an extreme luxury that even professional dual-income households are struggling to keep up with. The second point is that alternative lifestyles that used to be considered extremely luxurious have become way more affordable than a cookie-cutter suburban home with a 30-year mortgage. And the third point is what happens when people are making the logical choice and picking the better life for themselves. Now, I am calling it the American dream because it looks better in the title of a YouTube video. But let's be honest, the story is the same around the world, and some places have it even worse than us. According to data from the US Fed and the US Census Bureau compiled in the Case-Shiller Index, the average cost of a home in the US is now more than 7.6 times median combined household incomes. That's now significantly higher than it was in the lead up to the global financial crisis, an economic meltdown enabled by housing speculation. If you think that's bad, spare a thought for the UK, which has lower wages but similarly priced homes, or Canadians, who, according to data compiled by Financial Samurai, have on average 10% less disposable income but live in houses 75% more expensive. New mortgage rates are also at the highest point they have been since the year 2000, when home prices were only 4 times household income. The average person, even if they have a full-time working partner, cannot reasonably afford to purchase an average home at current prices with current interest rates without paying more than half of their before-tax income in interest. That's before principal repayments on the loan, and before income tax. In reality, the average bank wouldn't even write this mortgage because it would be financially irresponsible. Now, housing is expensive. You don't need me to tell you that. But every other part of the American dream has somehow become even more expensive. The cost of a car, a basic college degree, insurance, and medical care have all outpaced inflation, which is also at decade highs. The only way to keep up with these prices is to be benefiting from them. Every chart related to your personal finances is up and to the left. But investment asset classes are up even more. The average house is now earning more than the average American in capital gains that are taxed more favorably, and the stock market continues to break new records. Adjusted for inflation, household incomes have increased by 20% since 2005, but the Nasdaq is up by 340%. People who have had time to amass assets or children who are lucky enough to open an account with the First National Bank of Mommy and Daddy are the only people left who can afford the trappings of the middle class. But this isn't yet another video telling you how financially f***ed you are. I actually have good news, which is that more young Americans than ever are opting out of the American dream, as the price to buy a rundown family home can buy them a much better lifestyle by just rejecting traditions. There's one expense that has grown faster than all others, so much that it has become a status symbol even though it's technically free, and that's having children. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the inflation-adjusted cost of raising a child has increased by more than 50% since 2000, and some of the biggest expenses are now 250% of what they were 24 years ago. This data was collected for husband and wife families, so it averages out the cost of one partner needing to take time off work to look after children. The reason this is happening is because less people are having children. Young working professionals earn too much to be eligible for most child subsidies, but too little to really afford to raise children. The only people that can afford to have children are very wealthy people who don't care about spending thousands of dollars a year on the best preschools and paraphernalia for their child. This means that only expensive, high-end services catering to the children of affluent families can count on a reliable stream of business, so the expensive options are the only ones that last in the market. There is also a large group of people with lower incomes that still have a lot of children, but according to the US Census Bureau, that's partially why America has higher rates of child poverty than elder poverty. A study by the Tax Foundation found that married couples with children were the fastest shrinking group in middle-income percentiles because people couldn't afford to raise children. The Tax Foundation is a think tank that lobbies for lower taxes and lower government spending, so they might have an agenda with this report. But the numbers don't lie. People want to have children, they just can't afford to. Because even though it was something that people just assumed they were going to do in previous generations, it became one of the most expensive luxuries in our modern world. But just as everything you need to live a normal life is becoming prohibitively expensive for normal people, previously luxurious alternatives are becoming much cheaper. Remote work has allowed a lot of young people to get a job or sometimes multiple jobs at the same time and then do them from anywhere in the world. Traveling the world full-time or living in a cheap but exotic destination was the reserve of the jet-set class just a few years ago. But now almost anybody can do it while saving more money than they can get in a major city. These so-called digital nomads have gone from a small niche group to a major component of the workforce in less than a decade. A survey conducted by the workforce intelligence firm MBO Partners and published by the Harvard Business Review found that 17.3 million American workers now describe themselves as digital nomads, representing a 150% increase since 2019 alone. In this survey, digital nomads could include anybody from the tech worker sailing around the world, submitting their code once a day via Starlink, to a traveling nurse living out of a van, to someone who simply moved to a more affordable city temporarily to work remotely. In their research, the team for HBR found that the number one reason that people were pursuing this unrooted lifestyle was because they couldn't afford a more typical way of life. And if they were going to be uncomfortable both physically and financially, they would rather be uncomfortable while seeing the world. The sacrifices that you need to make to hit the road are much smaller than they used to be too. Remote jobs are still hard to land, but they are not nearly as hard to find as they used to be. Some people in remote work heavy fields like technology, data, or media creation have even created forums about doing multiple full-time jobs at the same time to make several full-time incomes. Living in a different country has also become a lot easier. Some popular centers with budget-conscious digital nomads are safer, cleaner, and have better amenities than American cities that are unaffordable. Some countries are so welcoming to young remote workers that they have even started offering digital nomad visas to simplify the legal and tax considerations of working in another country. Even if you feel lonely and want to see your friends and family frequently, saving $2,000 a month on rent buys a lot of plane tickets on budget carriers, since airline tickets are another thing that have noticeably become cheaper while everything else is getting more expensive. There are still hardships with living abroad, but they are getting easier every day, all while the American dream is getting harder. Now, not everybody priced out of living a normal life is pursuing such an adventurous alternative. There are some people that have been able to make the best of a bad situation, but there are far more young people across the world who are just giving up. In a time when the average American can't afford an unexpected $1,000 expense, luxury good companies selling $5,000 handbags or $10,000 watches are making record profits. This is because of a phenomenon known as doom spending. If you have worked hard in school, landed a good job, worked for 10 years, and are no closer to owning a home of your own, it's reasonable to want to see some kind of reward for all of your hard work. If you can't afford a sensible purchase to treat yourself, you could at least buy something that makes it look like you have some kind of financial stability in your life. It's not logical, but these companies don't make billions of dollars selling $2,000 shoes by appealing to logic. Doom spending is all a part of a bigger trend of people just giving up. In countries like China, where competition for housing and other essentials is even worse than here in America, there is a lying down movement. Young people are not going to work or school and are lying flat all day playing video games and relaxing. The trend was such a threat to the country that the government banned the term on all social media. And that might be the most important part of the dying American dream. What happens when everybody gives up on it? The American dream only works if most people believe in it to keep the system going. Maybe the boomers had it coming as they voted for policies that benefited them above their children, and now their children don't want to keep their system going. But I am sorry to tell you that most boomers are going to be dead before this really becomes a problem. It's hard for Americans to stop paying tax if they go and work in a different country, because we are one of the only countries in the world that still taxes its citizens even if they live abroad. But for other countries, losing workers who are moving elsewhere for a better life has already become a major drain on the systems that are funding their aging populations. Even if young Americans are trapped by Uncle Sam, they may not pay him as much. To be comfortable in a city like San Francisco, where the median house price is almost $1.3 million according to Zillow, experts estimate that you need an income of around $300,000 to live a comfortable middle-class lifestyle, if it could be called that. To sustainably fund that level of income in retirement, you would need invested assets of around $8 million outside your primary residence. The federal tax and FICA on that income for a single filer is $87,000 combined. But people live in San Francisco because they can earn that much in the area. But more people in these high-end jobs are willing to take a pay cut to work remotely in cheaper American cities, or a cheaper country. Google cut some of its workers' pay by 25%. And some of its workers were happy to accept it because they could work from somewhere that was 4 times cheaper. The federal tax in FICA on a salary of $225,000 is only $59,000, which means after state taxes, this remote worker would only be really taking home $35,000 less every year. But the tax system misses out on about the same amount. But when even these workers at the very top end of the labor market can't earn enough with their work to catch up to other people, you can't really blame them for giving up on the American dream. But all of this might just be part of a natural cycle that has been happening for hundreds of years. There is one big problem holding most young people back financially.
Housing has put home ownership beyond the reach for many.
If you don't already own a home, you probably can't afford one, and you probably can't even afford to rent one either. If your dream is a housing crash that will level the financial playing field, then I am sorry to tell you, but that's probably only going to make things worse.
Out on a hunt for housing, but feeling overwhelmed by the soaring costs.
Property prices are rising across the U.S., and that is, in fact, in part because of these higher interest rates.
Are real home buyers and sellers alike feeling a massive struggle to close deals or make money?
Housing is becoming more expensive for buyers and renters alike.
According to the real estate data firm Adam, homes are now unaffordable for median Americans in 99% of counties they analyzed. The remaining 1% were not affordable. There just wasn't enough data to use in their report. With statistics like these, the only hope that a lot of Americans have is a market correction that will bring prices back down. High prices aren't good for many people. Buyers can't afford a home, renters are stuck in a market where more than ever they need roommates to afford rent. And even though 2/3 of Americans own their own home, high prices aren't that great for them either. If you are one of the lucky people that own a home and you sell it for a record price, you still need to buy another home, which is just going to cost you a record price, leaving you no better off overall. While you own your home, you are going to pay higher property taxes, and if you do sell your home to buy a new one, you might have to pay capital gains. Most homes in America are now selling over the IRS's Section 121 exemption of $250,000 in profit since you purchased the home. So, if your home is worth a lot more than you bought it for, and you don't want to live on the street once you sell it, the only person you have really made money for is Uncle Sam.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
The only people who are really winning off that own multiple properties in addition to their primary residence. If the prices are too damn high, then the best thing you could hope for is a market crash. Right? Wrong. I am once again here to crush your dreams and tell you that a housing crash would probably only make it harder for you to buy a home for 3 simple reasons. The first reason is that if you are not in a financial position to buy a home right now, a real estate crash would put you even further behind. Today, you can buy a house with as little as 3% down from lenders across the country. So if you can't get into a house right now, there is probably something other than the down payment standing in your way. And unless house prices drop by 97%, you aren't going to be able to pay cash. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, average house prices fell by just 20% in 2008 from their peak in 2007. This was the worst housing collapse in history, so a 97% drop is unlikely. So that means if you can't buy a house now, then even after a market crash, you are still going to need a mortgage. According to a survey commissioned by NerdWallet and conducted by the Harris Poll, 37% of non-homeowners said they didn't have enough saved for a down payment on a mortgage. But a larger group, 42% of respondents, couldn't buy a home for a much more annoying reason. Lenders want to ensure 3 things when you borrow money from them. They want to make sure you have a down payment, the bigger the better. They want to make sure you have good credit, and they want to make sure that you can make your payments. The systems and criteria that lenders use to determine your ability to repay a loan are made up by the risk departments at the banks, and are kept private because it's considered a business secret. Normally, these rules are highly risk-averse, which is why you might get a mortgage application declined if the bank decides that you can't make repayments even if your repayments would be less than you're currently paying in rent. Every lender has a different set of rules, and they can change them at any time. Income from a full-time job is treated differently to part-time or gig work income. Some banks prefer income from business owners, and some won't lend anything to them. I wanted to buy a house at the end of last year, but when I told my bank that my income came from YouTube videos, they politely but firmly told me to get out of their office. Lenders also treat expenses like student loans, dependent family members, and other debt payments differently as well. All the different rules can get confusing, but they all have one thing in common. If the risk department says that home lending is getting risky, they are going to make it even harder to qualify for a mortgage to balance that risk. After a housing crash like 2008, lenders got much more conservative with who they would lend that money to, which back then was a good thing. But now, in 2024, if your income is not good enough to qualify for a mortgage now, you are going to have even less of a chance to qualify for a loan if real estate crashes. According to the National Association of Realtors, the biggest drop ever in the number of homes being sold in America came after 2008. This should have been the perfect time for the number of home sales to jump because prices had fallen significantly. The number of listings was inflated from foreclosures and interest rates were at record lows. But what actually happened was exactly the opposite. There were people that wanted to buy these houses, but nobody would give them any money to do it. And unfortunately, that's just the first reason. So it's time to learn how money works to find out a real estate crash probably won't get you any closer to owning a home. Talking about a real estate crash is one of the most popular finance subjects here on YouTube. Videos warning you about the imminent real estate collapse have regularly been getting hundreds of thousands of views for years. Any day, they might come true. The reason these videos are so popular is because people think that if they are right, then this could be their one chance to buy a home. Some influencers even talk about the investment opportunity that a post-crash real estate market could present. And aside from the titles and thumbnails, some of these videos do make a compelling case. I am trying to be a bigger person in 2024, and I'm not going to name any names. Instead, just focus on the subject. So, I am just going to list the long list of problems you are going to face if you try to buy the dip in real estate. For house prices to fall, one of three things needs to happen. The first thing is that buyers across the country lose their purchasing power because of mass unemployment or because banks stop lending them money to buy a home. The unemployment rate is near all-time lows, and if banks halt lending, then that's not going to help you buy a home unless you plan to pay all cash. If unemployment does rise, then young hopeful homebuyers are likely to be the first people laid off. You might be lucky enough to avoid getting fired and convince a bank to give you a loan, but there are other groups who don't need that luck. In 2011, the investment bank Morgan Stanley sent out an industry report to their clients titled Housing Market Insights, a rentership society. The report opens with the bank's analysis that after the subprime mortgage crisis of 2008, the combination of falling home prices, limited mortgage credit, continued liquidations, and better rental options is fundamentally changing the way Americans live. They were advising their clients, who are either institutional investors or ultra-high net worth individuals, that regular Americans were being evicted, nobody could get a loan, and people that lost their homes needed a place to rent. So it was a perfect opportunity to buy up residential property while nobody else could and jack up rents on people that had been evicted. The Morgan Stanley report was horrendously tone-deaf, but it wasn't actually wrong. Today, the average American home earns more than the average American, which is why the second reason that housing could get cheaper is even less likely to help you buy a home. The number of existing home sales in America is once again approaching levels that haven't been seen since the 1980s, when the population was half of that today. People who have locked in low interest rates are not going to sell their homes unless they are forced to, because if they buy a new home with a new mortgage, they will be paying twice as much out of pocket every month for the same place. A report by the Wall Street Journal found that even if people needed to leave their home to move cities, they were just renting out their home instead of selling it, because they could keep their sub 3% mortgage rate and charge record high rental prices. If you own a home right now, there is no reason why you would want to sell it. A flood of forced sales is much less likely today because lending standards are tighter than they were in the lead up to 2008, so most existing owners should be able to comfortably afford their mortgage. So, alright then, if people aren't going to sell the homes that already exist, we should just build more homes. This really is the answer. But according to the Department of Housing and Urban Planning, America is building fewer homes now than it was when we had half as many people. By now, I am sure you are all familiar with the problems caused by zoning, NIMBYism, and local building codes. These are all making the construction of newer homes slower and more expensive. A report by The Atlantic found that nearly half the cost of building a new home came from local rule and preferences rather than just materials and labor. There is another, even more simple reason why nobody is building new houses, and it's also the third reason why a real estate crash won't help you buy a home. A real estate developer needs to buy land, build a home, and then sell that home and land for more than they purchased it for. It's simple. But when land is so expensive, builders can't buy as much of it to build on. Back at the peak of home building in America, most of the operating margin was in the home construction itself. Now it's in the land. So even if a builder constructs a house on time and on budget, they risk losing money if the market swings by just a few percent against them. Builders typically fund construction projects with development loans, which are also expensive right now thanks to high interest rates. It's become a safer investment for developers to just renovate and flip existing homes instead of building new ones, because they can turn projects around faster and they don't have to deal with as much red tape. The only thing that could slow construction down even more is a collapse in real estate values, because if land prices are falling, then builders are not going to risk holding on to lands to build on. If you look at the data collected by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, you can see clear drops in new construction lining up with drops in home prices. Millions of people, particularly young people, not being able to afford a home is one of the biggest problems in America and a lot of other places around the world right now. But waiting for a crash to fix your problems will probably leave you very disappointed. In the last 400 years, real estate has gone from being owned exclusively by elite noble lords to something that the average family could buy. And now, it's becoming so expensive again that only elite landlords could afford it. To find out if this was inevitable, go and watch my video on the 400-year cycle of real estate over on How History Works. And remember, to get these videos a day early before everybody else and read topics that can't be made into videos, go and subscribe to my completely free email newsletter in the description to keep on learning how money works.